Which country, which FA, which league is the strongest this year? This is not an easy thing to measure. Honestly, it's probably impossible, but one of the things we tend to do to figure it out is say, well, how did each country do in European competitions? So in this video, what we're going to do is go through the remaining teams in the semifinals of all 3 European competitions and figure out which FA is having the strongest year and which country will end up with some kind of European trophy this season. So obviously we've got the Champions League, the Europa League, and the Europa Conference League. So we're going to start with the smallest team, the smallest league in this conversation, Switzerland, and their representative, FC Basel. They are now semifinalists in the Europa Conference League, having finished second in their group. The crazy thing is they're having a horrific league campaign. They're sitting 5th out of 10 in the Swiss Super League. These are the 20-time Swiss champions, so they should be doing better in their league. But at the same time, they have done so little on the European stage. How little? Well, if they qualify for the final, this will be their first European final of any kind. They did make it to the semifinals of the Europa League in 2012-2013, but they lost to Rafa Benitez's Chelsea, who went on to become champions of that competition that year. But the Swiss side are 90 minutes away from possibly making it to their first final, and who knows, getting the Swiss FA a very rare European Cup. On to teams from the Big 5 leagues. The second of 3 countries to have one team left are the Netherlands. They have AZ Alkmaar flying the flag. With Ajax, PSV, Feyenoord, they've all been dumped out. AZ is the last team alive. And they're kind of an interesting club because they are one of those ones that's outside of the elite Dutch clubs. They've actually been Dutch Eredivisie champions twice in their history. The most recent was in 2008-2009. Now, they've never won a European trophy, so this is a huge opportunity for them. But as far as the UEFA Cup/Europa League, they've been to the quarterfinals 3 times, to the semifinals twice, and were actually runners-up in 1980-81. The team that beat them that year, Ipswich Town. Oh my God, how football has changed. The cool thing for AZ Alkmaar is they have sort of transformed as a club over the last 20 years. Billy Bean, that's a name that should ring a bell for a lot of people, especially if you've heard of Moneyball. He's the guy that brought all this data-driven idea to the Oakland Athletics in baseball, and this has since rippled through all of sport. Anyway, Billy Bean started working with AZ Alkmaar back in the early 2000s and actually owns a stake in the club and has been a very important component in making them develop. They reshaped their transfer strategy, the way they assembled their squad, what kind of coaches they picked, and were able to make some pretty good deals and sell on some players for some big money. They also went from having an older squad to a more young squad, and it seems to be paying off. AZ easily won their group in the Europa Conference League and went on to beat mighty Lazio over 2 legs in their first knockout round. Quite impressive. And now in the semifinal, they lost their first leg 2-1 against West Ham at the London Stadium, but are bringing it back to the Netherlands to try and even the score. Could they make their first final in over 40 years? And the last FA with only one representative, surprisingly, it's Germany, and the team is Bayer Leverkusen. Led by Xabi Alonso, they've had a very interesting season. It all started out horribly. By the beginning of October, they were second from bottom in the Bundesliga with only 5 points from 8 games. That led to the sacking of Gerardo Seoane, and they replaced him with Xabi Alonso, who had pretty much no experience at the top level as a coach yet. But the revival, especially in the Bundesliga, has been quite spectacular. They actually started the season in the Champions League. Now, because they finished 3rd in their group, they had to play against a 2nd place finisher from the Europa League group stage, and that was Monaco. This tie was probably the most exciting one we've had across all of the European competitions this season. It was an incredible 5-5 aggregate thriller over 2 legs. Bayer Leverkusen winning 3-2 at home and then losing 3-2 on the road, but they ended up winning on penalties. Now, they are in the semifinal playing against mighty Roma. But Leverkusen are a very curious case. You kind of imagine them as a club that at some point in their history have quite a big trophy haul, but their cabinet is pretty much empty. They've been Bundesliga runners-up 5 times, and they've never been champions. They actually were 1 match away from winning the Bundesliga. They were top of the table. All they needed to do was draw, but they lost, and Bayern Munich won their match and took the league title that year. In 2001-2002, they actually made it to the Champions League final. But if you remember what happened in that final, where they lost to Real Madrid and Zidane did this, man, that's brutal to be on the losing side of something everyone remembers. But they don't remember you, they remember the others. Maybe it's better that way. But they do have one trophy of note, and that is a UEFA Cup back in 1987-88. So we'll see if they can make it to the final and double their tally. They will have to overturn a 1-0 deficit first. Now let's move on to the FAs that have 2 teams remaining. First, we'll start with Spain and Real Madrid. Real Madrid have won a paltry 2 Europa League trophies back-to-back in the 80s. But who cares, because they have 14 Champions League titles to their name. Yeah, they're the kings of the European Cup. They drew 1-1 at home in the first leg of this year's tie, and will have to go to the Etihad to try and make it to the final. What they hope to do is take a hat trick of English scalps, having already knocked out Liverpool and Chelsea in the prior rounds. Man City is left. If they can do that and get to the final, you do feel they have a really good chance of gathering their 15th Champions League. But the other team that has really helped the European trophy haul in the last 20 years is Sevilla. You get the feeling Sevilla aren't really comfortable with the Champions League, so they went ahead and finished third in their group and moved down into the Europa League. But that first half of the season was really not good. There was a whole mess where Jorge Sampaoli was in charge and doing an absolutely terrible job. In the end, they hired Jose Luis Mendilibar, and he is actually really steadied the ship, taking them far away from the relegation zone, which there was a question as to whether or not they'd be in the bottom three at the end of the season. And not only that, now they are in the semifinals of the competition they feel so comfortable winning. Went through to the quarterfinal where they shocked Manchester United. It was crazy watching that tie because if you watch the first leg, Man United were cruising 2-0 ahead and Sevilla did not look like there was a chance they could find a way to score. So they used Man United players to do that for them. Tyrone Malacia getting the first own goal and Harry Maguire with an absolute collector's item. Meme-worthy stuff, brilliant. Anyway, that made the match at Old Trafford 2-2. Sevilla brought it home and completely demolished Man U 3-0. De Gea having one of the worst nights of his career. And now they are facing Juventus in the semifinal, drawing 1-1 in Turin. They're going to go home, and you have to feel that they are going to be really confident in making yet another Europa League final, which, by the way, they've never lost when they've been in the final. Now let's move on to the other FA that has two teams remaining, and that's England. Normally we're used to seeing like two English sides in the Champions League semifinal, one in the Europa League and one in the Conference League. Not so this year. Man City are the last English team standing in the Champions League, and they are still chasing their first ever European trophy of any kind. To be honest, this really does look like their best chance. I mean, Haaland has been incredible this season, and they still have a squad brimming with talent all over the place. They're ready. And they do have probably the best manager of this generation in charge. So you really do feel like Man City's time might just be here. But I actually really want to talk about West Ham. I'm forever blowing bubbles. Pretty bubbles in the air. But anyway, let's talk about the Hammers, because it's awesome that they're in this position, especially considering their league campaign so far this season. Similar to FC Basel and Sevilla, the league campaign has been dismal. They're not even safe from relegation yet, which is astounding about West Ham considering the progress they made last year, and also how well they've done in this European competition. They're full stop the team with the best record in the Conference League this season. They have not lost a game yet and only drawn one time, and that was in the first leg of their quarterfinal against Ghent. They romped the group stage, and they've just been rampant ever since. Now in the semifinal, facing AZ Alkmaar, they won 2-1 at the London Stadium in the first leg, but will need to go to the Netherlands and cap it off to make it to their first final in what is a long time. They were in the Cup Winners' Cup back in 1975-76, lost that edition, but actually won the competition back in 64-65. Basically, it's been a while for West Ham. They have really not had much success. They've been to FA Cup finals recently and lost those, but it really would be cool to see these fans blowing bubbles and enjoying a European trophy. I mean, it'd also be pretty crazy if they got relegated from the Premier League and won this competition. Pretty sure that would be a first. So let's talk about the most successful country this season in European competition. It's Italy. It's good to see the Calcio clubs coming back, and there are actually 5 teams remaining in the 3 European competitions. And if all goes right for Italy, they could take the sweep. No country has ever won all 3. Well, because the Conference League is pretty much brand new, but that's never happened before. No other country can try that this year. So obviously in the Champions League, we have AC Milan against Inter, an absolutely classic matchup for any football fan. The first leg wasn't amazing, but I think the second leg really will be better. I hope. Please, Rafael Leao, come back for AC Milan or they have nothing in attack. The truth is, even if one of these two teams make it to the final, I don't think anyone favors them over Man City or Real Madrid, who are on the other side. But these are two historic clubs. AC Milan have won the Champions League 7 times, Inter have won it 3, but they've also won the Europa League 3 times. Now, though one of them will certainly be in the final of the Champions League, we may actually have an all-Italian final in the Europa League. I mentioned Juventus briefly because they are playing Sevilla, tied 1-1 before they have to go back to the Sanchez-Pizjuan. The other Italian side in that competition is Roma, led by Jose Mourinho, having won the Conference League last season, which was their first ever European trophy. Shocking for a team that has had guys like Francesco Totti and Carlo Ancelotti and Gabriel Batistuta play for them in the past. But yeah, Roma are just a storied club who have never won a European competition before last year, and now they are in the semifinal of the Europa League. They have a 1-0 lead over Bayer Leverkusen going into the second leg. Could they make it to the final? And the final Italian team, Fiorentina. See, I love Fiorentina because when I was growing up, they had these amazing purple jerseys that said Nintendo on them. That logo back in the 90s was awesome. And those were the years of Batistuta. It was just a good time. But the club went through a very difficult period, actually going bankrupt in 2001. It's kind of an amazing story, actually. The club was essentially dissolved, and the city and everyone banded together to bring it back. And they've done very well since. In their history, they've actually won 2 Scudetti, 6 Coppa Italias, and they do have a European trophy, the 1960-61 Cup Winners' Cup. But they haven't won anything in a long, long time. So this is the moment for Fiorentina to get back on the European map. And they have been really impressive in the knockout rounds. They knocked out Braga 7-2 on aggregate. They beat Sivasspor 5-1 on aggregate. And then Lech Poznan 6-4 on aggregate in the quarterfinals. But they also just lost the first leg at home 2-1 to FC Basel. So they're going to need to go on the road and put on a show. If they can do that and make it to the final, it would really be something for Serie A. Because for a time, that league was the destination. All the best players, all the best teams. That was the home of really global football. And that's changed, so it's nice to see them making a comeback. So which FA is the best this year? Which country is going to take home the most European titles? I'm sure you're all very much looking forward to the second legs. Let's see what happens. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Sebastian North. This is Campfire Football.